All right, cool. So we're recording for Libby and Brooke. So we're talking about how you as student teachers are going to be negotiating all of these power positions, people who are in power over you. And so as you do that, you're also trying to decide who you are as a teacher. Who are you going to become as a teacher? And so that can be really tricky, because usually what we do as teachers is that we teach the way we were taught. However, if you were taught a certain way in K-12 and you were taught a different way in your college education, you're wrestling with those ideas, right? And so it was a really interesting study for us to see that really she sort of framed the study as we are in this surveillance world. So it's called a panopticon, kind of like a prison, where there's constantly Big Brother sort of watching you and over you. And you feel like once you're done with student teaching, you'll be your own teacher, and you'll sort of feel that you're a teacher and you're the one in charge and you're the one in power now. But actually you just sort of moved to a different spot, but you still have people in power over you. And so students are aware of that. They know that the principal is your boss, right? And so they think that you have to ask permission to do things, as opposed to positioning yourself as an equal learner in your classroom with your second graders, your third graders. Yes. So Claire, your comment came up in this dissertation defense yesterday. We were talking about, and my suggestion was, we have a great new faculty member named Dr. Christina Cheetah, and she's teaching a 4,000 block this semester. And she comes with new knowledge about a co-teaching model where she puts two student teachers in the same classroom to sort of co-teach together and learn from that one mentor. And what that does is cuts your number of mentor teachers in half, so that you can be really selective about what classrooms you're sending your student teachers into. And so this was an idea that we pitched to the Office of Field Placement, because I think what you're saying, Claire, is that we're telling you to do all these things. We're not providing you with good models of that, right? We can model it in our own college classrooms, but for you to really see a fourth grade teacher who's teaching in critical ways and not afraid to address taboo topics, those are the kinds of teachers you need to be provided with in your field experience. And quite honestly, I don't know how to find them. I don't know how to find them. But that's something that we're definitely working on. So it's a problem that exists not just in our program. We have a particular problem because of our geographic location, I think. But I think with the virtual world opening up of teaching, you know, the possibilities are endless. If we could find one great model teacher that all of us could learn from, as opposed to putting you in a spot just because there's a warm body in a classroom that says they'll take you, I think we could make better decisions about that field placement. So, all right. So how do we counter the silence? How do we do this work? Slide number 9 offers some suggestions for that. So what can we do? We can not self-censor ourselves. And what I mean by that is, class meeting is where a lot of these topics are going to come up, because your students are going to be inquisitive about the world in elementary school. And the less you censor yourself or shut them down, the more they're going to continue to bring those topics to your attention during class meeting. So you don't ever want to say, I'm not talking about that with you. But you can say, I'm not sure we'll have time to get to that today, but let's make sure that we address it at the next class meeting or on Friday during whatever time or whatever. I used to have a poster in the back of my room. It was a black piece of poster paper, and I had a little, it was cute, you know, it looked like a street. So it had the dividing lines on the street. And then I had little cars, and we called that the parking lot. So it wasn't a street, it had parking spots. And so the kids could go get a car and they would write their question or their concern or whatever. And I would say, go put that in the parking lot and we'll get it out whenever, right? And so we had time every week where we went and looked at the parking lot to see if anything was there, something that kids wanted to discuss. So you do have to focus, you know, you don't want to go off on every tangent, but if it's something that's important to the kids, find a place to put it and pick it up later. Using probing and essential questions, which I'm going to model for you today when we look at Columbus and families. Thoughtfully discuss the topic. You're always trying to, in your conversations, promote awareness, sensitivity, and openness. Do not guess what might be offensive to someone else. We want to leave our presuppositions at the door when we come into our classroom. So one example of that is when my child first started at daycare when he was 2, his primary caregivers were my mother and myself. And I told his teachers this, you know, that it's just me and my mom and my son. And yet, you know, 3 days later, he came home with a craft that said mommy and daddy and Max. And I was like, y'all don't be paying attention up there about my family and how we are structured. So you cannot presuppose what might be offensive to somebody or what might not be offensive to somebody. Bring in relevant evidence, resources, and materials. I'm going to model that today. Draw on those found in effective teaching and controversial topics. And we talked about that last time as you worked in Journey Box groups. Use common sense and be aware of school policy. So if you are worried about administration before starting a unit, let's say on immigration, you might just approach your principal or send an email with your plans, you know, with your learning targets. And we're going to be discussing a critical version of Columbus's, you know, trip to the New World. And so that your administrator knows what you'll be talking about if that's something that you're nervous about. Consider minimizing or withholding teacher opinions and perspectives until after students have substantially shared and examined their beliefs. We talked about this too when we talked about disclosing or not disclosing. That's one of the big issues that we have. Do we disclose? Do you tell students who you're going to vote for during a presidential election or any other election? And there's actually a big debate in the social studies field about that. Some people feel like, no, we should be neutral always. My opinion, which is my opinion, is that if you are modeling neutrality and objectivity, you are teaching neutrality and objectivity. And so I believe that it's more powerful for to have your students try to understand how they feel about a certain issue. It is okay to not, I wouldn't use the word neutral, but it is great actually if you can see multiple perspectives and sort of not know where you fit there. But I think that's better than just saying, I'm not going to have an opinion on that. So to me, I would let your students, the realty. For me, I would let your students critically examine some perspectives, examine their own beliefs, and then if they're curious about yours, you could share that with them. I told my students, your opinion is your opinion, but if you can't back it up with evidence and facts, your opinion's not very strong. And so we talked about having strong opinions based in fact and evidence. And then finally, include a wide range of alternative perspectives. And encourage students to make up their own minds. So let's jump right into an example. So I'm going down to slide 10. How can we critically unlearn something in order to teach it more accurately? So to me, before you teach something controversial, you need to really understand it yourself and where the controversy lies. So here it is, slide 11. We're going to watch a special. It's a 9-minute video that was aired Sunday, a couple of days ago on the CBS Sunday Morning Special. I told y'all, did I tell y'all? That's my deal. On Sunday morning at 9 o'clock, I hear the trumpets on CBS Sunday morning, and I sit in my bed with my coffee, and nobody can bother me. That's my time. And so this past Sunday, I was floored by this because I knew we were going to do Rethinking Columbus this week. And I was like, I've got something to show my students. So this is the cool thing too about lesson planning social studies, because you can have a loosey-goosey plan, but when things pop up and happen, you pretty much have, you know, the world at your fingertips in terms of resources for social studies. All right, so I'm going to share my screen while we watch this special.
How many schools
And I'm
are
sure
open
there's an
right
ad.
now? How many front?
Those political ads. Okay, we're done with that.
Not everyone will be celebrating Christopher Columbus on the holiday tomorrow. In fact, critics question whether he or some other historical figures should be standing tall at all. It's a list that Mo Rocca tells us seems to be growing.
What do you think when you look at that statue?
It's George Washington. It's the first president of the United States. It's the leader of the American Revolution. But I also see a slaveholder.
Rutgers history professor Erica Armstrong Dunbar has dedicated much of her career to telling the story of Ona Judge, one of the more than 300 Black people enslaved by President George Washington and his wife Martha.
George Washington walked up and down this corridor, this area.
Ona Judge managed to escape when the couple was living here in Philadelphia, the nation's capital, during the 1790s. She was never captured, not that the Washingtons didn't try.
The Washingtons were very adamant that they wanted Ona Judge to return. And what's so very interesting is to think about George and Martha Washington relentlessly pursuing Ona Judge. He was using slave catching agents to collect Martha Washington and his property. And we have to reckon that there was that side of Washington alongside of his contributions to the creation of the nation.
And for Dunbar, that reckoning may mean taking Washington down from his pedestal, literally. Should some monuments to George Washington be removed?
I think it makes sense to have monuments of remembrance for George Washington in spaces where there's a direct connection to him. But do I need to see George Washington's face in every park or in places throughout cities? No, not necessarily, because for some people, he's a reminder of the trauma of slavery.
The long-running battle over America's monuments came to a head in 2015 after a white supremacist murdered 9 African Americans at Charleston, South Carolina's Mother Emanuel Church. Since then, around 100 Confederate statues have been dishonorably discharged. But since the death of George Floyd, the range of figures targeted as racist or oppressive has expanded well beyond the Civil War South.
Monuments are literally elevated above the people, right? This is a wrestle over power. This is a wrestle over who gets to tell the nation's history, who gets to be at the top of that history.
But the power politics behind memorials aren't always obvious. Christopher Columbus has long been controversial, a brilliant navigator and a brutal colonialist.
That's telling me my people are less than human. My people are brown-skinned beasts.
But many Columbus statues were erected in the early 20th century as symbols of pride for Italian Americans, a group that had faced fierce prejudice, even lynchings in the 1890s.
Slapping every Italian American in the face with this BS that's going on here.
For many Italian Americans, this was a way to demonstrate that they contributed to making America, a way to say that they were equal.
As Secretary of the Smithsonian, Lonnie Bunch may be the closest thing America has to a national curator. He believes monuments should reflect today's values.
I think that what the Columbus statue tells us is that it's a challenge to take something that was done 70 years ago and help it evolve. So my notion is that some of these statues can be pruned.
We have to get rid of every racist monument in this country.
It's history. It is part of history, and it should stay here.
In general, are you heartened by all these debates?
Anytime people talk about history, I'm a happy guy. And I think there's something powerful about a country periodically debating who it is and who it wants to become.
But what many have found jarring is the lack of debate. Missionary Junipero Serra, torched. Augustus St. Gaudens's tribute to an all-black Union regiment graffitied. Thomas Jefferson toppled. Ulysses S. Grant fallen. Even Gandhi has been bloodied. As a historian, do you start to wonder, I wonder if all these people know their history?
Well, actually, no, I don't wonder. I know that they don't. I know that the vast majority of Americans don't know their history.
Does that bother you?
It horrifies me. I also understand that there's anger, there's rage, and sometimes there's collateral damage.
There is a big element of anti-Americanism in this, not only anti the bad things, but anti the good things, because there are no good things, right? The whole history is corrupt, and I think that's wrong.
Writer Richard Brookhiser thinks a little bit of humility is in order.
I mean, if you're only going to have statues of perfect people, you're going to be left with Jesus Christ. You're not going to have a lot of other statues. People are complicated. We have to realize that about ourselves and about the dead.
Brookhiser is the biographer of several founding fathers, including Washington.
Washington was a hero in the struggle for self-rule. And the struggle for self-rule is the big story of the last 250 years. It includes all the other stories. It includes anti-colonialism. It includes the struggle against racism. The American Revolution was the greatest experiment in human political history. And it's crazy to throw that in the garbage can.
I do not think you erase Washington and Jefferson, and of course, obviously now everybody loves Hamilton.
Lonnie Bunch sees in Washington and our other slaveholding founding fathers contradictions we should strive to understand.
It's almost like saying, how do you understand your parents if you only know a little bit about them? The more you know about them, the more you better understand who they were and then who you are. And that's what I'd like us to see with some of the founding fathers, help people understand a little better who they once were and who they can be.
It's a big moment in anyone's life when they realize their parents aren't perfect people.
You're right. And then as you get older, you realize they were more perfect than you thought initially.
Perhaps the best way to bring peace to our memorial landscape is to add statues. In 2017, Philadelphia dedicated this statue of Octavius Catto, a 19th century African-American civil rights activist who was murdered on his way to vote. It's right outside City Hall, which is where we bumped into Philly resident Les Starkey and his daughter, Summer.
This gentleman finally got his due.
Seeing this statue gives you a feeling of
Pride. I lift my chest up a little bit more. I do, man. I mean, it's one of us. I can do something great like him. He was a great man, Summer. We're going to read more about him, okay? Promise.
passions may continue flaring in the short term.
Are you angry?
Yes.
Are you angry?
Yes.
I'm mad. We're mad.
But as in all things historical, it's important to consider the long view. This isn't the first time in history that statues have been toppled.
No, there was a statue toppled in New York City in 1776, a gilded statue of George III, which had been put up when we all thought he was a good guy.
The British monarch.
The British monarch. We were fighting a revolution against him. The statue was torn down. And the story is it was made of lead, and the lead was melted into bullets.
Are any of these things permanent?
Nothing is permanent. You know, we're all going to die. There'll come a time when the United States doesn't exist anymore.
Some things last longer than others.
Well, some things last longer than others, and let's hope the good things last longest.
Now I'm going to lose that again, aren't I?
John Bon Jovi has written any number
Sorry, I have technical difficulties when I full screen stuff. Okay, what did we think about that special and this idea of monuments and who we heroify, who we vilify, who we decide to take down or leave up? What I really liked about this section, I like Mo Rocca. He used to be on Comedy Central on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart. But what I like about his reporting on this is that he got multiple perspectives from folks, right? So he was looking at people who have arguments for leaving monuments up, leaving our past, and there are representations of the past the way it is. And then he got someone from the Smithsonian to talk about why, you know, it might be a healthy sign of democracy to rethink those things. So what did you guys think about this? What are your thoughts on monuments?
Dr. Billows, I don't know if this happened for anyone else, but for me, you got really, really, really quiet. Like I had my volume on 100 and could hardly hear you. I don't know why.
That's not better?
No.
Okay. I'm making sure that all of these are off. Any different? How about now?
A little, yeah.
A little better?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll yell next time. Tell me what you're thinking about the monument.
Personally, I kind of relate to the video because there's been a lot of debate back where I'm from because of a monument downtown wanting to be taken down. I think it's a Confederate monument put up by the Ladies of Liberty, or I'm sorry, I'm not a social studies buff, but the women that, you know, stayed home and supported the Confederacy. And there's been a lot of debate about taking it down, and I think it should be taken down. And I'm kind of frustrated because a family friend of mine shared this article about it, and she was like, well, if y'all are going to take down things like this, then you need to take down every statue of Martin Luther King Jr. And I'm just like, are you really going to compare someone who fought for equal rights versus someone who fought to keep people enslaved? Like, I can't even like begin to understand how they even compare. Like, I don't know, it baffles me.
Speak it clear, say it louder for the people in the back. Honestly, like, the amount of rage I have when I think about like people trying to defend racism, it's like I want to jump off a cliff. That's how angry I am. Like, I don't get why people think racism is a good thing to. It just doesn't make sense to me why people think they can be racist and like that's like the most best thing in the universe. But like, as soon as you try to take one thing from them, it's like all hell breaks loose. And I'm like, and then like how you pointed out, like comparing Martin Luther King to someone who stood for the Confederacy, like, first of all, they're on two different ends of the playing field. Like, you cannot compare the two of them because Martin Luther King fought for equality for all people. What is the Confederacy about? Like, let's go look that up, like, period. And like, my thing is about just like a whole general, I guess, feeling from that video is that I feel like a lot of us need to sit with ourselves and like think, did this video make me uncomfortable? Because if it did, then that means something's wrong, period. And I genuinely believe that, again, like, and I've said this before, this country is just going backwards. Like, I don't understand why there's even a debate to take down statues that remind people of what their ancestors have gone through, what they've had to do. Because this country, believe it or not, was built on racism and slavery. I will say it till I die, because who like worked in the cotton fields? There was, you know, Asian people who had to work in mines. Like, there's so many different things I could bring up that have built America. And for some people to even think slightly that America has nothing to do with racism. It's this most beautiful country in the universe. Like, we love her. Like, it's just mind-boggling to me because like this country is built on hate, like
So
literal hate.
Let's reclaim our power as educators. Because what we've not done is we have not taught social studies in critical ways. We have not taught history in critical ways. And Samaria, I don't want to say you're preaching to the choir, but I think a lot of us feel what you feel. And I think that this is not me making excuses, but I think that folks don't understand the difference between overt racist acts and a racist ideology that's, built within the foundation of something. And so when people claim I'm not racist, they're saying I haven't said a racist thing, I haven't done a racist thing, right? Like I haven't enacted that overtly on someone. But what we don't tend to recognize and take on and reckon with, which is the word that keeps coming up today, reckoning. What I don't think that we do is we don't understand how that ideology of racism created the fabric on which the country was built. And therefore, it's in us like the air that we breathe, right? Yes, thank you, Claire. Yeah, you don't
Dr. Bellows.
Yeah. And
I just want to say, like, I feel like most of us do feel like some sort of disappointment in this country, right? Disappointment in what's going on. But I'm just going to put it out there. There's a lot of people that I've met personally here at this college. Even some people who I follow like on social media who don't like agree with like, I'm not gonna say names because I'm not that type of person, but I just know there's people who are totally like on the other side who kind of just don't say anything, or like how you say, like they don't act on like racism, but like maybe their social media feed says different, or maybe they've said something that they didn't realize was racially tied, or stuff like that. And I feel like even in this class, like we're learning so much that we probably would have never even learned if we didn't have you. Because to be brutally honest, people love to beat around the bush. They do. They don't like to be straight up about this kind of stuff. And I really appreciate that you are really straight up about this, because we need to hear it. Like a lot of us need to hear it and like be receptive of it and like be like, okay, so this is what's wrong. This is why I need to vote, because my voice matters and I need to uplift others. And I feel like there's not a lot of people of color here at App State. And so we're always, I mean, I've gone to predominantly white like schools too. So like I've always felt that kind of singled outness, I guess. And I feel like a lot of people who are white, Caucasian, whatever, like they need to use their privilege and their platform to speak out against inequality. Like, I feel like if you don't use your platform, whether that's social media or, talking in class or, bringing up what's wrong, even at the university level, let's think about that. Like, if you don't use your platform, whatever that looks like, then I feel like you need to reevaluate yourself. Because again, like you had said in the beginning, like if people are like scared or afraid to say something, then that means they know what's going on is wrong and they need to use their voice. So it gives them even more like ammunition to talk and be like, this is wrong, let's point it out and let's like fix this, because America's in the gutter and she's gonna stay there unless something changes. Period.
So I dropped a thank you for your thoughts, Samaria. I dropped a handout that we've used at the college level with faculty and staff that I think can be really useful to sort of think about, because I hear what Samaria said about like, I think that when you feel like you have the option to sit down and not be a part of this conversation, that's the definition of privilege. So if you feel like I can just step away from this and not have to think about it, you are able to do that because you have privilege. And so what this handout, this was very useful to me as a white woman to see, okay, I don't, you know, overtly act racist. However, I do recognize a white supremacist culture exists in this country, and it exists very strongly in our public school system. And if you look at some of these things on this PDF that I dropped in the chat, some of these are not so overt in terms of what you might think of a white supremacy culture might look like. So white supremacy culture does not mean that you're wearing a white hood, okay? But if you scroll through this thing, this idea of a sense of urgency, how many of you feel that a lot? A sense of urgency about finishing something quickly, okay? Or what about there's only one right way to do something? That's based in white supremacist culture. This idea of either or thinking, that it can't be both and, it has to be either or, that's based in white supremacy culture. Power hoarding, I'll tell you, people who do a lot of power hoarding in this world are educators. And I will tell you that when I started teaching, it felt really good to be in charge. It feels good to be in charge. That is part of white supremacy culture, though, having power over somebody else. And so we have to check ourselves with these ideas and these notions. This also, this idea of paternalism that's there on page 4, those with power often don't think it's important or necessary to understand the viewpoint or experiences of those for whom they're making decisions. Don't we do that as teachers? We say, I know what's best for that kid. I'm the one making the decisions for that kid. So just all these ideas and ways of thinking that are based in an inherent racist ideology of white supremacy is something that we need to check ourselves on all the time. And we need to be able, with the both and, see that not just white people contribute to white supremacy culture, that we all play a role in it somehow. And so that's where that self-reflexivity comes in. So thanks for bringing that up, Samaria. I'm going to move forward with Columbus, although this is a great conversation and one that needs to happen. I want us to look at the power of words. And so that document I gave you, there's a lot of terminology in there that has power. But I want to talk about the power of words when we talk about Christopher Columbus specifically. So I'm on slide 11. And I'm looking at, I want to look at the words that are in these two examples. So there's links in the Google slide there, but I'll drop them in the chat as well. The president issued a proclamation on Columbus Day 2020 just yesterday. And I would like you to read it if you haven't already. So take a moment. My apologies. Claire, your face, by the way, wins all the awards for cognitive dissonance and polka dot brain. So I wrote in the
Intrepid hero?
Yes, intrepid. So speak up or drop in the chat. What kind of language? Marcy, you okay? She did a face palm. What kind of terms, words are jumping out at you here? Inherently sinister. Patriotic, radical, intrepid. What is the dictionary definition of intrepid?
I was just about to look that up because
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
it's
It
like
just sounded
fearless.
like something we should like look up.
Fearless, adventurous, often used for, yeah. My partner left his keys in the car. I'm like, oh, that sucks for you. I gotta go. Okay.
Dr. Bellis, can I just like say something?
Yeah.
My thing, like when I read this, is like whether or not you agree with this president, he knows what he's doing. In this entire letter, his goal is to appeal to people who feel this sense of strong patriotic and don't understand the issues with Columbus. And I think it is so interesting that he has all this focus on Italian Americans with not barely a mention of Native Americans. And I think that's the thing, is whether or not you agree with this man, he is smart. He knows what he's doing. Whether he had someone write this for him or not, this was a like radical activist teaching of racially divisive concepts, when this thing right here is divisive. Like this part right here is literally creating more of a divide in the nation than anything. And like, I think for me, like I like shake, because it's just like, he knows what he's doing. Like this was given within intention. Someone who tells him what to do told him to do this, because what he's doing is he's approaching to himself of, oh, the American that was founded on these values and this optimism that we carry on, like that is who we are. And it's like, okay, let's pause. Sorry, I just had to get that off my chest.
So I think that the point of this exercise is to notice the language, right? And Alicia's like, this is deliberate, like this is for a reason, right? And I think that that's what we have to be able to see through, and that's what we have to help our students see through. So Alicia, you mentioned the word patriotic. This is for people feeling very patriotic. So like, what does that really mean? And we've talked about this before, to use your language arts skills to deconstruct a word with your students. There's so much in here that needs to be deconstructed. But words like patriotic, national heritage, what does that really mean? Do we have one collective national heritage? What does it mean to be an extremist? What does that word mean? Yeah. And so, you know, I see that, Samaria, but also it doesn't make me want to puke, because I choose to use Howard Zinn's version of the definition of patriotic, which means that the most patriotic thing you can do is critique your government when you feel like there's a problem, right? So to me, I am patriotic, right? But my patriotism doesn't look like your patriotism, right? Or someone else's. So here, and this is in the Google slide too, here is something I saw on Facebook, you know, where I get all my news. Just kidding. But somebody edited the proclamation. So tell me what you think about this. What do you think about these edits in red?
I like the ending about moving monuments to museums where we can look at both the good things that they have done and the bad. Because I think you can still learn from it, but it's not like a daily reminder.
I like that too, Sam. I think that's important. Because like, yes, it's not something that we want to acknowledge, but like I know for me, like when I went to like the Holocaust Museum in DC, it was really impactful to like just walk through that. And like it was a choice. It wasn't something that I like had to do, and it wasn't something that was shown in my face, but it was a choice. And so I think it's important for us to not forget that this was a part of our history, because that's how history repeats itself, but acknowledge it. So I agree with you, Sam. I like that a lot.
I like how they replaced like extremists with mindful people and seek to replace with broaden, because a lot of like, or people that like don't agree with the issue often tend to just like bash, like, you know, like the change and like calling them these names and, you know, like replacing it, but it's more like expanding and making it like learning from it and bettering it. So.
Okay. Anybody else? Wouldn't that be a cool exercise to take something and edit it the way this person did? I wish that was my idea. I wish I had done that. But I think what it does is it helps us see where and how language can be unifying or divisive, right? And so I think that also, if we're talking about studying a historical person, we need to look at their successes and accomplishments as well as their flaws. We did the Rosa Parks lesson, right? So think about how that gets taught with just Rosa being at the center of that story and the only character in that story. But once you learn about all the people and the context and what was actually going on in the world, the story becomes a lot more interesting, right? And so I think that multiple perspectives, especially when teaching folks that tend to be heroified or vilified in the curriculum, is super important. So what do we do? I'm back to slide 11. What do we do with all of this then? My favorite resource for teaching about Columbus or the beginnings of America, of course, now I would say the 1619 Project is a great place to go. But if you're going to tackle Columbus, I would recommend the Rethinking Columbus resource. Now, I've given you a free version of that that's old. There's still really great stuff in it. And we're going to look at a couple of things in that resource. So the link is there in the Google Slides, but I'll also drop it in the chat for you. And this resource is from an organization called Rethinking Schools that is out of, where are they? Washington State. My friend Wayne Au is the editor of Rethinking Schools. And so this, gosh, when did this come out? A long time ago, 1991. So like I said, there's a more current version that's not free, but this is the PDF of the original. And so what I want to do is I want to go down and I want to explain an activity I typically do in a face-to-face class called the Untold Story. This is good for kids. I would probably do 3rd grade and up for this activity. Where is it? Where did it go? And so I want to look at the Untold Story, and that's on page 32. So if you scroll, it's a really big document. Like I said, there's a ton of great stuff in here. And when I say 32, do I mean the PDF 32 or the actual resource page 32? Let me see. Yeah. It's the actual page 32 on that resource. If you're looking at a PDF page number, it's page 35, but it's called The Untold Story by Tina Thomas. Can everybody find that? I know I gave you a huge PDF. But I wonder if we might take turns, sort of like a popcorn read, reading each one of these phrases. Here's what I usually do with this. I usually take each sentence or phrase. You can see that there's like a double space in between the phrases, and I cut them out into strips. I give a student one of the strips and a blank piece of paper, and they draw what that phrase says. So for example, I'll read the first one. Once upon a time, a group of people lived on an island, Bohio, now called Hispaniola, in the Caribbean. These people, whom I consider my people, were proud of their island. They built beautiful farms and villages from dirt and rock. They respected the plants and animals. Many people lived on Bohio. They called themselves Tainos. And so if I were a student, I would get that sentence strip. I would have a blank piece of paper, and I would draw all of that. I would illustrate some people living on a beautiful island. I might draw their farm and their village. I might draw dirt and rocks, plants and animals, right? So you get the idea. You number those strips, and so you have the kids do their illustration. They tape the sentence on the back of it, and then we all stand up and we stand in a circle and we stand shoulder to shoulder in our number order, and then we're holding our picture so that the circle, our friends can see our drawing, and I can see my sentence strip on the back of the paper that I taped there, and we read this in order. And so I wonder if we might go through and read. I read the first one, and then if I call your name, can you just go on to the second one? So let's see, Samantha Hopkins, I see you up top. Can you start with that one that says one day?
One day, some of my people saw 3 boats far off in the ocean. They gathered around and watched as the boats came closer and closer. When the boats reached land, strange-looking people got off. Let me keep going or calling somebody.
Sarah Rears. Thanks, Samantha.
These people were not like us. Their skin was pink, their hair was the color of sand, and their eyes were the color of the open sea. They wore strange items that covered their bodies, even though it was hot, very hot.
Megan Hagler.
Their leader was a man called Christopher Columbus. He immediately put a cross and flag down and acted as if the land were now his. This was odd. We did not believe anyone could own the land. Besides, we were already living there.
Kelly?
Through motions and gestures, it became clear Columbus wanted gold. He wanted us to find it for him.
Addison?
We tried to explain there was little gold in our land, just a few small pieces gathered from the water. We have no gold. There is no gold here, a man said in the Tiano language.
Valerie?
Columbus appeared very angry and walked away. My people were afraid of his anger. They wondered what he planned to do next.
Claire?
After several months, Columbus returned to our island for a second visit. He brought hundreds of people on 17 boats. Before he left this time, he captured many of my people. Over 500 were forced onto his boats. We later heard they had been taken to Spain to be sold as slaves. Many died on this voyage to Spain. Their bodies were thrown into the ocean.
Callie?
During this second visit, Columbus again told my people to bring him gold. If you do not, he warned, we shall slay your people.
Taylor?
Our people had to bring him gold, even though it was very difficult to find. Columbus made us wear buttons to show we had brought him gold. If we didn't have our buttons, my people's heads were cut off and they bled to death.
Sam Snyder?
My people formed an army, but we did not have the guns, swords, and vicious dogs used by Columbus and his crew. We were defeated.
Jane?
My people ran for their lives into the mountains.
Those who were caught were hung or burned to death. Many others killed themselves. 2 years had passed and over half of the Taino people of Bohio were dead.
Alicia?
My people's peaceful and proud land was taken over and destroyed. These newcomers cut down all the forest. They let their pigs and cows eat all the grass. Thousands of my people's lives were destroyed for these people's pleasures.
Kelsey?
Before long, the conquerors killed almost all the Tainos. Other native peoples in the Americas were also attacked, some with weapons, some with terrible new diseases, but not all were destroyed. My people have survived.
Jennifer?
We have little to show our children as proof of what happened to the Tainos, but we have our stories told from generation to generation. The stories tell of the cruel genocide of my people hundreds of years ago, once upon a time in an untold story.
So what do you think about the untold story?
It makes me sick to my stomach.
It's probably a different version than you've heard before. And so when we're thinking about multiple perspectives, that's where we want to be. Now, I said 3rd grade and up. Remember that the activity here is to cut those into strips. And so the one about cutting off hands and bleeding to death, that might be something that's not age appropriate, right, for elementary. So, and I do hear teachers say like, well, they've seen worse on their video games. Sure, but that doesn't mean I'm gonna play that video game in my class, right? So we have to make smart decisions, but they're hard decisions to make. I think 5th grade, I might leave it in, but that's my personal decision, you know, as an instructor. But if you're asking kids to illustrate these things, you know, that might not be something that you want adorned on your classroom walls either. So things to think about in terms of hard decisions to make. However, the thing that I like about the Untold Story is that we get the perspective of the Taino people. We don't talk about America or the United States. That's not where Columbus landed anyway, right? Nor did he ever reach what we call modern day America. So what you have is a proclamation given by our president, federal government, about Columbus Day. You've read a little bit of a different take or perspective on that. And then what I want to show you, the other thing that I love in this resource, if you can scroll on past the Untold Story, down to, on the actual PDF, it says page 47, but it's page 44 if this book were printed out. But it has a map there, and it says the Iroquois contribution to the Constitution. And what I've done in years past is just copy the map, enlarge it a little bit, and copy that map and give it out to folks, my students. And then what I do is I ask them, oops, sorry, leaned on my keyboard. I ask them to look at how many, can I zoom out? I can't, there we go. How many tribal nations do you see in modern day United States of America? And what kids will start to do is they'll start to count, and then they'll stop and they'll say there's too many for me to count, and I'll say that's my point, right? So we're looking at the number of tribal nations across modern day United States. And then what I have them do is look locally, right? And sort of see where we are. Do you guys notice some words in here that look familiar to you? Like what?
Catawba.
Catawba?
Aurora.
Pamlico.
Yeah. So we have direct connections with these words in this language, right? To show that, which can help contextualize, that there were people here. And so the whole idea of this word discovery needs to be critically unlearned, right? Discovery of people, sure, but not of the land, right? And so we can talk about that word. Sorry, I'm getting in the chat. Yeah. All right. So there's Rethinking Columbus. It's like I said, there's a million things in there that are great resources. You have that PDF here in the slideshow, but I also dropped it in our resources page in the our shared drive. So what other questions do you have about Rethinking Columbus? Concerns, thoughts?
I have a quick question.
Sure, Jane.
So you said like teach that, like if I was a third grade teacher and I'm teaching that kind of thing about Columbus, how would I go about undoing maybe misconceptions they have from their second grade teacher that taught them that it was like a happy like Thanksgiving type situation?
Remember when we started the Rosa Parks lesson and I said, tell me what you know, and I didn't judge any of your knowledge or thoughts, and I just typed it all out. And so always you want to start with a historical topic, especially one that's controversial. You've got to see what they know first to see where your jumping off part is. Because you never know. What if they had an awesome second grade teacher and they were like, we did learn about Columbus and he was not all that and blah, blah, blah. Then you can go, okay, cool. And you can, right, like decide where to take it further with them. Whereas if they tell you, oh, I know the song about 1492 and I can sing it, and right, then you go, okay, cool. Let's unlearn some of that stuff, right? Who was Columbus really? So it's a great question, but that question goes for anything you're going to teach social studies wise anyway, right? Find out what they know first so that you know where you're starting. If you look all the way, I know this is, I should have put these on another slide maybe, but if you look all the way at slide 16, y'all, those are just two little things. I went today and said Pinterest, and on Pinterest I said Columbus. And these were the first two things that came up. And so here we're looking at, I always have problematic issues with just cutesy stuff anyway. Like, y'all, this is not what Columbus looks like, all right? This is not what Columbus looked like. So inaccurate representations of people, poo-poo that, okay? The word explorer is not how I would classify, or a word I would use to describe Christopher Columbus now that I know what I know, right? And so that's the part we were talking about, that language is really important, and how you're presenting that perspective is also really important. I'm going to share with you Encounter. Oh yeah, it's over here. Too many books. Let's see. And you can find this one too on YouTube. Has great read alouds now of most any children's book that you might be interested in. So this one is by Jane Yolen. It does get some critique, but I still really like it. And I'm going to drop some other resources for you too. I won't read the whole thing, but I'm just showing you how we can really look at the perspective of the Taino people as opposed to Columbus. So even on the front of the book, you see that there's a young brown-skinned body, right? And then this white man, and that's Columbus in this book. And so basically, it has beautiful illustrations, and the child talks about a dream that he had, and he talks about the ships like they were birds, just because he had no context for what an enormous ship like this was. And so I'll read this page to you. The baby canoes spat out many strange creatures, men but not men. We did not know them as human beings, for they hid their bodies in colors like parrots. Their feet were hidden also, because they had on shoes. And many of them had hair growing like bushes on their chins. 3 of them knelt before their chief and pushed sticks into the sand. Then I was even more afraid. And so what it does is it positions the landing of the Columbus from the people that were on the land, as opposed to from Columbus's perspective. The next day, the strangers returned to their great canoes. They took 5 of our young men and many parrots with them. They took me. I knew then it was a sign from my Zemis. It's his little talisman, good luck charm, a sign for my people. So I was brave and did not cry out, but I was afraid. That night, while my people slept on the shore, the great sailed canoes left our bay, going farther and farther than even our strongest men could go. Soon the beach and trees and everything I knew slipped away until my world was only a thin, dark line stretched between sky and sea. In the early morning, another land lay close enough to see. Silently, I let myself over the side of the great canoe. I fell down and down and down into the cold water. Then I swam to that strange shore. Many days I walked, following the sun. Many nights I swam, and many times the sky was full with the moon and stars. All along the way, I told the people of how I had sailed in the great canoes. I told of the pale strangers from the sky. I said our blood would cry out in the sand. I spoke of my dream of the white teeth, but even those who saw the great canoes did not listen, for I was a child. And so it was, we lost our lands to the strangers from the sky. We gave our souls to their gods. We took their speech into our mouths, forgetting our own. Our sons and daughters became their sons and daughters, no longer true humans, no longer ours. That is why I, an old man now, dream no more dreams. That is why I sit here wrapped in a stranger's cloak, counting the stranger's bells on a string, telling my story. May it be a warning to all the children and all the people in every land. So it's a really different version of the Columbus story that your students might have heard. It helps them sort of take on the perspective of a young Taino boy. So any other questions or comments about Columbus or teaching it? All right. I want to do walk through another quick example with you because I think this one's so important. The Columbus story is kind of for older grades. Constructions of Family is a way to start really young with children. I didn't really finish my slide here, but that's okay. So I'm on slide 13. There's an article about teaching constructions of family using text sets. And I've created a little presentation for you about using text sets, which might help as you're looking for a book for your Journey Box project. But I want to share with you a collection of family books. I thought I put a bunch of them on here. A collection of family books and my favorite anchor text for teaching about family. My son is in love with this book. He has me read it all the time. And I think it's great for him because he's trying to make sense of his family. I think all students do try to make sense of their own family. I remember as a young child, I had a tall, round dad. So I thought all dads were really tall and sort of fat, you know? And I went across the street to play with my friend in the first grade, and her dad came out of the house and he was really skinny and really short. And I was like, who is that? That cannot be her dad. Because in my mind, a dad looked a certain way, right? So kids are really trying to make sense of family. I love this too. To my family who sometimes did not understand me, but encouraged me to go after everything I wanted, even when we did not agree. As I now realize, this takes a lot of love to do. This is my favorite. All right. Some families are big. Some families are small. Some families are the same color. Some families are different colors. All families like to hug each other. Some families live near each other. Some families live far away from each other. Some families look alike. Some families look like their pets. All families are sad when they lose someone they love. Some families have a stepmom or stepdad and stepsisters and stepbrothers. Some families adopt children. Some families have 2 moms and 2 dads. Some families have 1 parent instead of 2. All families like to celebrate special days together. Some families eat the same things. Some families eat different things. Some families like to be quiet. Some families like to be noisy. Some families like to be clean. Some families like to be messy. Some families live in a house by themselves. Some families share a house with other families. All families can help each other be strong. There are lots of different ways to be a family. Your family is special no matter what kind it is. Love, Todd. This book is by Todd Parr. So that's a great anchor text to start talking about different families. Claire, did you have a question?
I just wanted to share something. It'll be really quick, I promise.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so my mom watches these two little boys, and one of them is a year and a half, and his favorite show right now is Hey Dougie, which is like about this show where these little animal kids go to this daycare. Anyway.
What's it called?
Hey Dougie.
Okay, Hey Dougie, yeah.
Okay. And it's so cute because one of the little animal kids is adopted because he's an alligator and his parent is an elephant, and they never like talk about it, but it's just there. And like obviously we're older, so we understand, you know, hey, they don't match. So what's going on? But it's just cool because they introduce such a complex topic at such a young age. And so if you teach preschool or you know the real little babies, that might be something good to use in your classroom.
That's great. And I have a couple more. I'm just going to show you the covers of them. And I linked to Sesame Street's awesome. I also linked to, in the slideshow, the one that says using, what does it say? Using text sets. And so that's a slideshow. And I've got these listed in there. But one, Daddy, Papa, and Me. This one, Fly Away Home, is actually about a homeless dad and son who live in an airport. So constructions of families, some families are small. And Tango Makes Three is a great little book about two male penguins. It's based on a true story that happened in a zoo. These two male penguins took on an egg and sat on it until the little egg was hatched. And so the two male penguins had a little daughter. So, and you never know really how these might resonate with kids. Of course, I saw the family book and wanted to read it to my son because I wanted him to start adopting the terms stepdad and stepsister. But actually, when we read that book on the page that says some families have two mommies and some families have two daddies, he always says, like me, I have two dads. And so that's how he, you know, that's how he interprets that or that, you know, strikes a chord with him. So family construction is one of those that's really important that we have to be really cognizant of. It's another part of relationship building in your classroom where you don't just know your student and know about your student, but you know about their family. Our daughter Claire, we only have her every other week. And so it's important to us, for Claire's 5th grade teachers, to know that she's with us, you know, every other week, and then she goes with her mom every other week. And so I'm sure things are different for her in terms of how she gets up in the morning and how she goes to bed at night, right? And so just being cognizant that you've got kids who are living in different situations and that we don't take a deficit lens to that and say, oh, their home life is so hard. No, it's just their home life. It's what is normal and natural to them. And so we don't need to project and say, I was raised with a mom and a dad in my little nuclear traditional family, and that's what we're striving for. And so if this child has two moms, they're struggling. Or if this child has a single dad and that's their only parent, bless their hearts, they're struggling. So we have to get out of that deficit lens where our sweet Southern selves are blessing everybody's hearts because we feel pity for the children when actually this is just their life, right? This is their day-to-day. And so we honor that and respect it. And we celebrate all types of family constructions in our classroom. So I ran through that really quickly since we're getting short on time, but do you have any questions about teaching about family or constructions of family? One thing they did at Lucy Brock before my child showed up Monday, on Friday, his teacher was asking me, I need a picture of him to put on his cubby. So when he gets here, it's there. I would like a picture of your family so that, you know, we can put that on the wall and he can see his family in the classroom. And so really honoring who your kids are, and what their family situation is like, honoring and respecting that is very important. And that can be a big part of your class meeting in the beginning of your school year, is to sort of get to know kids and talk about families. Any other thoughts? Can we do a calendar check-in then in that case? So y'all can let me know what's happening with field placements, if you know anything, and how we want to shake out the rest of our semester. So today's the 13th. Are you all completely online with your other classes now? Yes. Okay. And I have that we were going to or maybe I don't. That we're going to meet next week for sure, but tell me about the week of the 26th. Do you have field placements then?
I was told that the full-time field placement starts on the October 29th.
29th.
Yes, so we can, and then after that, those 3 weeks, we have a full-time internship.
Okay. So what that means is that we're going to meet on the 20th, next Tuesday. We'll meet again on the 27th of October. And then you'll be in the field. And are we coming back on the 17th or the 24th of November?
I think the 24th.
Okay. And that'll be our last class day. So I feel like I've lost a class day somehow, but that's okay. We'll make it work. All right. So what I want to do then, if that's the case, I want to keep us moving on Takaki. Do you feel like you're learning some content, some historical content in the Takaki? I do too. Folks tend to love that. So I'm going to keep it up even though we didn't have time to share today. In our chapters 2, 3, 4, and 5. And so what we'll do is we'll do an extended Takaki session next time to really get at those. And then what I want you to do is give an update on your journey box by next week. Do you think every group could sort of check in with the whole group about their journey box topic and where they are? Okay, so that might mean that you want to meet with each other at some point between now and next Tuesday, your journey box group. I'll be around Thursday afternoon, you know, for office hours. If anybody wants to drop in or use my Zoom space for that, that would be fine. All right, so we're going to do, let me get my calendar in front of me for the class.
I have a quick question about the box project.
Yeah.
What's the exact due date for it?
I think we want to share on our last class day. And I can envision that as like you're sharing, you know, because y'all are going to it'll be digital, right? So you'll be sharing your screen to sort of share with us what you created. But I think that if you want more time with it, I think it might be useful on November 24th, which is that last class day before Thanksgiving, for us to share it then. But then you would have time if, you know, folks gave you comments on it or suggestions or maybe another resource or a children's book that you wanted to add to it, that you could have until finals week to sort of wrap it up. But if it's all done and you share it November 24th, that's good too. Does that make sense? Like a share date, but then a hard deadline for when all the content has to be there. And that would just be over finals week, like the first week of December. But let's say present journey boxes Tuesday, November 24th, before Thanksgiving. All right, so we have 1, 2. That's it. 2 more classes than Journey Box Share. How are we going to do that? All right. So let me get your thoughts then. We're going to really catch up on Takaki next week. And then I think we'll end class by doing a Pinterest critique. So I would love it. Let's see if I wrote this on. Yeah. I'm going to put in our asynchronous work then for this week. Takaki, you'll read either chapters 6, 7, 8, or 9. So just like you did this week, except for a different chapter that you choose. I'll get that sign up sheet set up right here as soon as we log off. And then what I want you to do is I want you to attempt to find some lesson plans or a lesson plan on your Journey Box topic. Just see what comes up. And I think that if you searched Teachers Pay Teachers or Pinterest, what's another one you guys use? Share My Lesson, I think, .com is one. Or just any other resource online that you can find. Try to find a lesson plan that's already written up for your topic for your Journey Box. And what I want us to do is we're going to be working in small groups to critique those. I have an activity for you to do in small groups with that. Sorry we didn't break up today. Today was kind of long-winded and all in one spot. So my apologies for not being more engaging today. So Takaki, and finding I'm going to have an assignment box where you can upload a lesson plan. So either a link that you find or just like a resource on Pinterest or something that you could share with us that you found about your Journey Box topic. If you meet with each other and you all want to share the same one, that's fine. Does that make sense? Okay. So I'll have an assignment box to upload that and another assignment box to upload your countdown summary for Takaki, and that'll be it for next week. Okay? All right. One more thing, type in the chat box. I liked this last week. Type what you need to hear today. What do you need to hear today?
I'm so sorry. I have to run and take my dog out really quick. She was literally just rubbing her butt on the carpet. So I'm like, I don't want you to have an accident. Let me take you out.
Here's what Valerie needs to hear. Go take care of your dog.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Good. Bye. Your test will come back negative. Everything will get done eventually. I reassure you. You are right where you are supposed to be. You deserve it, girl. One thing at a time. God is good and he is still in control. It'll all be worth it. We can do this. Your child will eventually eat lunch at school. Anybody else need to hear something? All right, y'all take care. Work on your Journey Boxes, okay? Let me know what help you need with that, and try to find some time to rest, okay? Bye.
Wait, Dr. Bellows, before you go, could you upload the Takaki chapters again this week? I'm still at home, so.
I can. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's fine. I'll go to copyright hell for you, Jane. Bye. Have a good week.